At the rear window of the palace convoy, a child's toy lay on the road where it should not have been. The guard saw it in the mirror and eased off the throttle. Protocol said keep moving. He did not. The radio stayed silent. Inside the car, Prince George struck the glass once, hard, pointing past the tail lights. The guard's hand hovered over the indicator, unsure.
The convoy slowed almost imperceptibly before anyone else noticed, the lead vehicle maintaining pace while the rear car eased back, tires whispering against the wet tarmac as dawn light flattened the color from the road. The guard's eyes stayed on the mirror, fixed on the small object resting near the curb where it should not have been, a child's toy abandoned between security markers, bright plastic dulled by grime. His foot hovered, pressure reduced by instinct rather than thought. Protocol was explicit. No stops, no deviations, no improvisation. He registered the distance to the escort ahead, the radio's low static, the hum of the engine settling into a lower register as the speed bled away. In the back seat, the child shifted, a sharp movement that drew the guard's attention without sound, and then the glass rattled once under a small, sudden strike. The guard did not turn his head. He did not need to. He felt the gesture through the vehicle, the urgency carried in the vibration, and saw the child's hand in the reflection, pointing past the taillights toward the roadside. The convoy commander's voice should have cut in immediately. It did not. The silence stretched just long enough to feel wrong. He flicked the indicator, a controlled signal, and guided the car toward the shoulder beneath the overpass, where concrete pillars trapped the cold and amplified every sound. The lead vehicle continued forward for 3 seconds before braking, confusion transmitted through brake lights rather than words. The guard brought the car to a halt, engine idling, hazard lights steady. He spoke into the radio with measured calm, citing a mechanical irregularity, nothing dramatic, a phrase practiced for drills and never used. The reply came late, clipped, instructing a visual check and immediate rejoin. He acknowledged, without committing, unbuckled, and stepped out into air that smelled of damp stone and fuel. The road noise pressed in, distant but constant, and he crouched by the rear wheel, hand brushing the tire, eyes scanning reflections in polished paint. The toy was closer than he expected, wedged near a drainage grate, and when he picked it up, he felt the faint warmth of recent contact. He stood slowly, weight shifting as he recalculated. Inside the car, the child had gone still, hands folded now, gaze fixed on the space where the guard would reappear. The guard returned to the driver's door and opened it just enough to speak, voice low, reassuring without promise, telling the child to stay seated. The child nodded once, jaw tight, eyes bright but controlled. The guard closed the door and checked the convoy log on his wrist display, scrolling back through timestamps that should have been uniform. One entry was missing, not delayed, absent. He felt the first tightening in his chest, not fear, but focus, the sensation of a situation narrowing. Over the radio, command repeated the order to move. The guard did not answer immediately. He watched the reflection of the overpass pillar ripple across the windshield and listened to the quiet insistence of something out of place settling deeper. He keyed the channel and confirmed the fault again, adding a secondary check, phrased as procedure rather than doubt, and this time the response carried a faint edge, impatience masked by formality. The guard acknowledged, ended transmission, and stepped back into the vehicle, sealing the door with a soft, final click. The interior felt smaller now, the temperature unchanged but perceptibly colder, the child's presence registering as a responsibility with weight. The guard adjusted the rear-view mirror a fraction and met the child's eyes briefly, offering no smile, only steadiness, then returned his gaze forward. He reached down and ran a diagnostic, fingers precise, while his peripheral vision tracked the escort vehicles repositioning ahead, their movements slightly out of rhythm. The system reported nominal status across all parameters. He saved the report without transmitting it. Outside, one of the escort officers approached, boots measured, posture correct, but his eyes flicked toward the overpass shadows before settling on the guard. The exchange was minimal, technical language exchanged like currency, and the officer returned to his position without comment. The guard watched him go, noting the distance he kept from the rear door. He glanced again at the log, the missing entry still unaccounted for, and manually flagged the time window, embedding the marker where it would be difficult to erase without authority. The radio crackled with an update. Route change canceled, original path reinstated, proceed immediately. The guard acknowledged, fingers tightening on the wheel. He started the engine anew, eased back into traffic, and rejoined the convoy with practiced precision. As they moved, he scanned the mirrors, noting a civilian vehicle merging behind them, dark, unremarkable, maintaining an exact distance that felt studied. He adjusted speed slightly. The vehicle adjusted with him. The child shifted again, quieter this time, and the guard felt the movement through the seatback, a subtle reminder of what sat behind protocol. He reached up and activated the privacy screen, dimming the rear compartment without sealing it off entirely, a compromise that bought the child space without isolating them. The road ahead opened, the overpass receding, but the sense of containment remained. He logged the stop as required, choosing language that was accurate but incomplete, and sent it through the system, knowing it would trigger review. The radio remained active, chatter resuming as if nothing had happened, yet the guard cataloged every voice, every cadence, measuring familiarity against deviation. The civilian vehicle stayed with them through 2 turns, then peeled away at an exit it had no reason to take. The guard noted the plate, committed it to memory, and exhaled slowly through his nose. The child did not speak. The guard did not look back. He kept the car centered in the lane, hands steady, eyes forward, and allowed the convoy to carry them onward, aware now that the stop had changed the texture of the day. Whatever had been interrupted had not disappeared. It had simply moved ahead of them, waiting to see if he would notice the next irregularity and whether he would choose to act again when it appeared.
The convoy had been back at speed for less than 10 minutes when the pressure began to surface in ways too subtle to register as alarms, but too consistent to dismiss. The radio traffic tightening into shorter exchanges, acknowledgments clipped to their minimums, as if someone were trying to reduce the number of words that could later be examined. The guard felt it in the cadence of instructions rather than their content, a controlled urgency that did not match the road conditions or the weather, both of which were stable, predictable. Sunlight filtered through low cloud, diffused enough to flatten shadows, and the temperature inside the vehicle held steady, climate control humming softly beneath the engine's rhythm. He kept his eyes moving, mirrors to road to instruments, and noticed that the convoy spacing had subtly compressed, the lead vehicle closer than doctrine preferred, reducing reaction time while appearing efficient. The radio chimed, and command issued a direct instruction to increase speed and bypass the scheduled checkpoint ahead, citing congestion. The guard acknowledged receipt without adjusting his pace, waiting for the supporting data that normally followed such a change. None came. He checked the navigation overlay, confirming the checkpoint status as active, staffed, and clear, its presence a fixed point in a route that had not changed in weeks.
The child shifted again behind him, a quiet sound of fabric and breath, and the guard adjusted the mirror just enough to see the outline of a small figure seated upright, hands still, eyes forward. The order repeated, sharper now, layered with an implied expectation of compliance. The guard felt the familiar pull of protocol, the training that emphasized unity of movement and unquestioned execution, and he balanced it against the accumulating discrepancies, the missing log entry, the unscheduled stop that command had accepted too easily, the civilian vehicle that had matched their speed too precisely before disappearing. He requested clarification, phrasing it as a technical question about checkpoint staffing rather than a challenge. The response came back quickly, too quickly, asserting authority without detail and instructing immediate compliance. He slowed by a fraction instead, creating space, and watched the lead vehicle surge ahead before correcting, its driver reacting rather than anticipating. A secondary vehicle appeared in his right mirror, emerging from an access road, positioning itself alongside the convoy with practiced ease, its markings legitimate at a glance, but its timing too exact. The guard noted the unit designation and ran it against his memory of the roster, finding a gap where familiarity should have been. The radio crackled again, command now instructing him specifically, naming his call sign, to fall back in line and proceed. He acknowledged, voice even, and began the mental calculus of resistance that would not yet look like refusal. He eased the vehicle toward the center of the formation, complying in appearance while adjusting his following distance to maintain an unobstructed field of view, and keyed a private channel to request confirmation from the checkpoint directly, routing the call through standard relays so it would appear routine. The line stayed open longer than expected before a response came through, the voice at the other end calm, professional, confirming readiness and noting no reported congestion. The guard thanked them and closed the channel, the confirmation settling heavily in his awareness. The secondary vehicle drew closer now, its driver visible, posture rigid, eyes forward, and the guard registered the lack of acknowledgement, the absence of the small habitual gestures exchanged between units that trained together. Command cut in again, this time ordering the convoy to divert to an alternate secure location for a brief procedural review, language deliberately vague, the coordinates transmitted immediately. The guard's display populated with the new route, a short deviation that would place them off the main artery and into a controlled access zone bordered by administrative buildings. He felt the narrowing again, the sense of options closing, and glanced once more at the child through the mirror, noting the way the child's shoulders had tensed, as if reacting to something unseen. He asked for the authorization code associated with the diversion, a requirement that could not be bypassed without record. The pause that followed was short but telling. When the code came, it was valid, but the formatting was off, a minor deviation that most would overlook. The guard logged it without comment. He adjusted speed to match the new lead vehicle's pace, the secondary unit slotting in behind him now, boxing the rear car more tightly than doctrine allowed. The radio traffic dropped away, an enforced quiet that amplified the sounds inside the vehicle, the faint click of the turn signal canceling, the soft intake and release of the child's breathing, the muted rumble of tires crossing a bridge seam. The guard's jaw tightened imperceptibly as he prepared contingencies, rehearsing responses that would buy time without triggering escalation. He activated the vehicle's internal recorder, a step that required no permission but carried implications, and tagged the file with the earlier log anomaly, creating a chain that would be difficult to break. As the convoy approached the turnoff for the alternate location, he delayed by a second, then another, forcing the secondary vehicle to adjust, revealing its driver's impatience in a brief surge forward. The guard took the turn smoothly at the last moment, committing to the route while marking every deviation in his mind. He did not know yet who was misusing authority or to what end, but he understood now that the pressure would continue to increase, layered with legitimacy and urgency, until compliance felt easier than resistance. He kept his hands steady on the wheel, his posture unchanged, and focused on the narrow space where protocol and instinct overlapped, knowing that the next decision would require him to choose which one he would allow to break first.
The alternate secure location resolved itself into a low-profile administrative complex set back from the road, its perimeter clean, its access points understated, the kind of place designed to feel invisible to anyone not looking for it. The convoy slowed and filed through the gate without challenge, credentials exchanged with a cursory scan that felt procedural rather than attentive, and the guard noted how quickly the barriers rose, how little scrutiny lingered on the rear vehicle. He parked where directed, engine idling until a hand signal cut the ignition, and stepped out into air that carried the faint smell of cut grass and cooling asphalt. The secondary vehicle stopped closer than necessary, its presence pressing in, and before the guard could reposition himself, a man approached from the building's shadow, stride measured, suit immaculate in a way that suggested intention rather than habit. The man introduced himself with a name the guard recognized only from briefings, a senior official attached to protective oversight. His credentials produced smoothly, laminated edges unscuffed, hologram catching the light just so. His tone was calm, authoritative, pitched to be reassuring, and he stated that an emergency jurisdiction had been invoked, requiring the immediate transfer of the child to alternate custody for assessment. The words were correct, the sequence plausible, but the guard felt the friction between them, the sense that the explanation had been practiced to accommodate questions that had not yet been asked. He acknowledged the authority without stepping aside, requesting confirmation through his own channel, and the official smiled faintly, not unkindly, as if indulging a formality. The radio crackled with a supporting voice, confirming the transfer order, but the guard caught the delay between transmission and acknowledgement, the way the official's eyes flicked toward the sound, as if anticipating it. He positioned himself between the man and the rear door, posture neutral, hands visible, and asked for the accompanying documentation. The official produced a tablet, its screen already active, scrolling through forms that bore the correct seals, but loaded too quickly, pages flipping without the micropauses of a live connection. The guard scanned, noting a minor discrepancy in the timestamp, seconds out of alignment with the system clock he trusted, and felt the quiet escalation of his focus. Behind him, the child shifted, a small sound of movement that drew the official's gaze past the guard's shoulder, interest sharpened by proximity. The guard adjusted his stance, blocking the line of sight without comment, and repeated his request for verification through an independent channel. The official's smile tightened by a fraction, and his voice cooled, reminding the guard of the hierarchy, of the consequences of delay. The guard listened, nodding once, absorbing the pressure without responding in kind, aware that every second bought space but also raised suspicion. He keyed his wrist display, initiating a silent query to an oversight node reserved for anomalies, and felt the vibration that confirmed receipt. The official's patience thinned, his language shifting subtly from explanation to instruction, and the guard recognized the narrowing window in which refusal could still be framed as procedure rather than defiance. He asked a final question, simple and precise, about the location to which the child would be transferred, and watched as the official answered without hesitation, naming a facility that existed but did not serve the stated function, its designation outdated by years. The guard inclined his head, acknowledging the response, and felt the decision settle into place with a clarity that surprised him.
He did not raise his voice or draw attention. Instead, he reached back and activated the rear door lock, the soft click barely audible, and informed the official that he would be initiating a containment review due to inconsistencies in the order. The official's expression hardened, authority now stripped of its veneer, and he stepped closer, lowering his voice, invoking urgency and responsibility, suggesting that delay placed the child at risk. The guard met his eyes briefly, then looked past him to the perimeter, noting the subtle repositioning of the secondary vehicle's occupants, the way their hands hovered near their belts without touching. He transmitted a concise report through the anomaly channel, attaching the credentials, the timestamps, the recorded audio, and flagged it as active misuse of authority, a designation that carried weight, but also consequences. The radio erupted with overlapping instructions, voices competing for dominance, and the guard filtered them out, focusing on the physical space, on maintaining control of the immediate environment. He instructed the escort officers to hold position pending verification, his tone leaving no room for debate, and was gratified to see compliance ripple outward, training asserting itself over confusion. The official protested louder now, threatening formal action, but the guard had already disengaged, his attention shifting inward to the vehicle, to the child whose presence anchored every calculation. He opened the rear door just enough to speak, keeping his body between the child and the crowd, and told the child they would be staying together for the moment, his voice steady, offering certainty without explanation. The child nodded, eyes wide but composed, hands gripping the edge of the seat. The guard closed the door and returned his focus outward as the oversight node responded, acknowledging receipt and advising immediate isolation of the asset. He relayed the instruction, ordering a containment maneuver that repositioned the convoy vehicles to create space, engines idling in a controlled arc that separated the rear car from the official and his entourage. The official attempted to step forward and was blocked, not roughly but decisively, by an escort officer who had chosen a side without ceremony. The guard recorded everything, aware that transparency was now his shield. Sirens sounded faintly in the distance, not urgent but purposeful, and the guard felt the tension shift, the balance tilting away from the manufactured authority that arrived so confidently minutes before. He remained where he was, shoulders squared, breathing even, knowing that the outcome would not absolve him of scrutiny, but certain that the choice he had made aligned with the narrow, uncompromising duty he carried, to protect the child first and answer for it later.
The containment settled into place with a quiet efficiency that contrasted sharply with the tension it held. Vehicles angled just enough to create distance without appearing aggressive, engines running, doors closed, a ring defined more by intent than force. The guard stood beside the rear car, close enough to feel the warmth of the metal through his sleeve, his attention split between the perimeter and the child inside, whose outline was faintly visible through the tinted glass. The administrative complex seemed to retreat as the escort officers repositioned, their movements economical, eyes alert, the earlier uncertainty replaced by something steadier. The senior official was no longer speaking. He stood rigid, jaw set, aware now that the narrative had slipped beyond his control. The guard received confirmation from oversight that an independent response unit was en route, their arrival time precise, their authority clear, and he acknowledged with a single tap, logging the instruction automatically. He did not allow himself relief. Instead, he reviewed the recording feed, ensuring redundancy, tagging each segment with time and location, aware that omissions could be as damaging as errors. The radio traffic normalized under oversight control, voices calmer, directives clearer, and the guard noted how quickly legitimacy reasserted itself once exposed. He opened the rear door partially and checked on the child, keeping his body angled to shield them from view, asking quietly if they were cold or hurt.
The child shook their head, swallowing once, eyes tracking the guard's face for cues, and he nodded back, conveying stability through stillness. He closed the door and returned to his position as the sound of approaching vehicles grew louder, tires on gravel, announcing the arrival of the independent unit. They entered the perimeter without ceremony, insignia unmistakable, credentials verified in seconds, and took over the outer ring with practiced ease. The guard briefed their lead officer concisely, facts only, no interpretation, letting the record speak where judgment might fail. The senior official was escorted aside, his protests contained within procedure now, and the guard watched as authority corrected itself not with drama, but with process. He remained with the rear car, the responsibility not yet transferred, knowing that until custody was formally reassigned, his duty did not diminish. The air felt cooler as cloud cover thickened, light flattening again, and the guard adjusted his stance, grounding himself in the familiar weight of the moment, aware that every action from here forward would be examined in detail he could not control. Formal protective custody was established with signatures and codes rather than words, the independent unit's authority overlaying his own without erasing it, and the guard participated fully, confirming identifiers, verifying seals, ensuring that the child's transfer, when it came, would be deliberate and witnessed. The child remained in the vehicle throughout, shielded from the procedural exchange, and when the time came to open the door fully, the guard did so himself, stepping aside only enough to allow the unit's designated protector to approach at a respectful distance. The child hesitated, fingers tightening briefly on the seat edge, and the guard offered a hand without speaking, steady, uninsistent, letting the choice remain the child's. After a moment, the child accepted, the contact brief but grounding, and stepped out into the cooler air, flanked immediately by the new detail. The guard watched closely, noting posture, tone, the absence of urgency, and felt a small internal acknowledgement as each element aligned with expectation. Once the child was secure, he stepped back, his role shifting from active protector to witness, and focused on completing the final reports, attaching his personal statement, precise and unemotional, detailing the deviations observed and the actions taken. The senior official was escorted away for debriefing, his earlier certainty replaced by silence, and the guard did not look at him again. The convoy vehicles powered down one by one, the soundscape changing as engines fell quiet, leaving only the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of wind through trimmed hedges. Oversight informed the guard he would be required to remain available for inquiry, his actions under review, and he acknowledged without comment, having expected nothing less. As the independent unit departed with the child, the guard stood alone beside the now empty rear car, the space behind him feeling larger, quieter, its absence tangible. He exhaled slowly, rolled his shoulders once, and began the methodical process of resetting, aware that the consequences of his choice would unfold over days and weeks, but certain that in the narrow moment where protocol had faltered and instinct had intervened, he had acted within the deepest obligation of his role.